Mr. Dave Braun. All right. I appreciate your time, my man. So to give everybody a little history before I turn things over to Dave, there's a great organization that if you've not heard of, it's through Syracuse University called the Institute for Veterans and Military Families. They provide resources and education for aspiring veteran entrepreneurs. And I had the pleasure a couple of years ago when I first found out about this organization, and we can do more plugs because I have a few other people that are also affiliated in our panel. But I got the pleasure of meeting Dave and his partner, Larry Broughton. And they, you always say that when you come across people that have stood out in your mind as been so influential in your change and your growing, Dave and Larry have been very much that in my business. So what I'm going to offer to everybody listening, just so you know, Dave is the CEO of Pro Website Creators. He's also works closely with Larry Broughton, who I mentioned before, is the CEO of Broughton Hotels. You also run a company together called Ugozi. Is that, I always mispronounce it, Ugozi?
You got it. Yep.
And just is constantly giving back. Him and Larry donate a lot of their time to serving veteran entrepreneurs. And, just everything that I've learned from you guys has been amazing. So that being said, Dave, I got to kick things off with one of my funky questions. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So if you had a choice between two superpowers of being invisible or flying, which would it be and why?
Oh, it'd be flying, of course.
Okay.
It'd be flying because that way I could get places faster and get more accomplished and achieve more, right?
I love it. I love it. Well, Dave, you're a very successful entrepreneur in your own right. I know you support our military every day, but what I love about this is you're going to give a perspective from a civilian's perspective, and you have a great system that what I've loved about your mind is you know how to basically take ideas and make applications that people can actually quantify. And so your topic today is going to be establishing big benchmarks for personal success, right?
Right. You got it.
All right. So without further ado, I'm going to get off here again. I'm going to turn the floor over to you. And I do hope that everybody's truly listening because what I've seen what you've come up with, Dave, and it really allows you to quantify. A lot of this stuff that we talk about with leadership is a lot like, it's philosophical, it's conceptual, sometimes really hard to put your finger on it, right?
That's right.
And you have pretty amazing about doing just that. So thank you for your time today, Dave. I'm going to jump off here, man, and the floor is yours. Again, everybody, feel free to ask questions on the Q&A section on Facebook. At the end of this, we'll try to carve out a few minutes to answer some questions live. And if not, Dave, if you could just jump on Facebook and try to answer some questions on your own, okay?
Sure. And I'm going to share my screen. So before you go, Travis, I want to make sure that you see it, okay?
Okay.
Let's me do that. All right. Do you see it?
Yep, I do. It's all yours, brother.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you, Travis and David, for having me on. It's an honor. I'm just so thrilled to be able to talk about some of the stuff that I've learned in my 30 plus years in the corporate world and getting close to 10 in the entrepreneurial world. And I'm just grateful to be able to share stuff. One of the things that, Mike Stevens had said earlier about you really can't lead yourself until you lead others, or you really can't lead others until you lead yourself. That's the way it is. And so it's kind of like, to me, in a lot of ways, it's like when you are on a commercial airplane and there's some issue with the oxygen and they have the mask drop down and then they tell you to put your mask on before you can help somebody else. So that's kind of what this particular presentation talks about, is leading yourself to get to a level of personal success so that then you can go on and get to significance and to help other people. Because it's hard to help other people unless you've got reserves. I think Mike talked a lot about that. So again, guys, thanks for being here. And all you military folks and civilian folks that are out there watching, listening, thanks for your time. And I really, really hope you get something out of this. And one of the things that when we talk to people, make sure that when you're listening to a presentation like for us, just write down 1, 2, or 3 things that really stand out to you. Because the last thing you want to do is attend an hour presentation or the half day today and a half day tomorrow and have a bunch of notes and never do anything. So really try to whittle it down, at the end of the day or at the end of every presentation of something that you can really take action on, right? Because there's so much good stuff here. I mean, just listening to Mike was like, wow, he reminded me of so many awesome things. So let's get going. All right, so we're going to take a little bit of a road trip here. So we're going to go from the Richard Nixon Library and Museum. You see San Diego on there, but the museum is in Yorba Linda, California, not too far from me. I've been there a couple of times. It's awesome. Say we're going to go to the George H.W. Bush Presidential Library over there in Texas. Well, when you're going to take a road trip, what is the requirements that you have? Okay, the first thing is you got to figure out some kind of vehicle that you're going to go in. It's either going to be, a car, a plane, or whatever, but you got to figure out the vehicle. The next thing is you're going to have to fuel it with something. And the reason I'm talking about the road trip is this is going to be like personal success as well. So you need some kind of a fuel to power you. And then, of course, you're going to need to have a map. That seems kind of obvious, but it's good to state the obvious up front. Now, a map requirements there are going to be three things here. You're going to need a starting point. We've seen that on this particular map. You're going to need to eventually have checkpoints along the way, but you're also going to need an ending point. Now, there is one big thing that you've got to remember here when it comes to charting out your road trip, and the points have got to be accurate. Because if the points aren't accurate, we're going to be in trouble. We won't get to where we want to go. So can you imagine going on a road trip and you think you're starting from California, but you're really in Kansas? I mean, who knows where you're going to end up being. All right. So personal success, as I said, is very, very similar to a road trip. It's a journey and it requires the same type of things. It requires a vehicle. And in this case, your vehicle is going to be something like education. It's going to be a job. It's going to be a career, a franchise, investments, etc. Mike talked about one of the guys he was advising to take a lower level job in order to get to that six-figure job, and that's exactly what he did. That was his vehicle to get to where he wanted to go. You're also going to need some type of fuel, and in the case of personal success, a great acrostic here is MITRE. So think about these 5 things to use to fuel your journey for personal success: money, information, time, energy, and relationships. So think of the word MITRE. Any of those 5, all of them, or just one of them, can be what you need at a particular point to get you to where you want to go. And of course, you're going to need a map. Now let's do a couple of definitions for our map. 1 is our starting point. Where are we starting from? 2, checkpoints. How do we know we're still on the path? And we're going to talk a little bit more about checkpoints later, as well as both the starting and ending point and the ending point. Where are we going to? Again, I just want to reiterate this. All 3 of our points have got to be accurate: the starting, ending, and those checkpoints. So now you think about it, when you're going on a trip, road trip, or personal success trip, journey, what is the order that you got to establish these things in? Well, number 1 is think about the end point. You got to think about where you want to actually go before you do anything else. Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind. He's not talking about a road trip. He's talking about a personal success trip, a journey that you're going on. So begin with the end in mind. Okay. The second thing you need to figure out is the starting point. Okay. John Bingham says, the miracle isn't that I finished. The miracle is that I had the courage to start. Starting and being accurate on your starting point can take a huge amount of courage. We're going to talk a lot about the starting point and how to really establish that, because it's not as easy as you think. Okay, then number 3 is the checkpoints. A great quote that I found was, don't wait until you've reached your goal to be proud of yourself. Be proud of every step you take toward reaching your goal. Okay, so you can't figure out the checkpoints until you've got your ending and starting points And this talks about enjoying the journey along the way. All right. So again, the ending point, that's easy to figure out. Starting point, like I talked about, is simple, but it's kind of hard to do. And checkpoints are unknown until you establish the first three, or the first two. So I've got a question for you. What does success mean to you? What does success mean to you? Because it's different at any particular point in your life or your journey. It's different for each person. So I'm going to give you about 60 seconds. Okay, I'm going to be silent for 60 seconds, and I want you to think about it. If you're driving or whatever, think about it. But if you have, pen and paper by you, write it down. What is it that what does success mean to you? Got 60 seconds. You got about 40 left. "20 seconds. Keep writing. Just let your mind flow." Another 10. All right. Hopefully you got something down. Now, I'm going to guess here that what you wrote down and what you thought about is going to fall into one of these upcoming categories: money, relationships, or health. Now, let me give you a quick warning. Success in one of these areas can derail you in all of the others. Okay. For example, let me illustrate this. So if you're not careful, you can sacrifice your health and relationships to get money. You spend years and away from your family, try to build that company. And I know people who have destroyed marriages for the sake of building their companies. So what ends up happening afterwards is they end up later in life sacrificing their money to get their health and relationships back. So this is not what you want to do. You don't want to sacrifice one at the expense of the others. All right, so there is a better way to figure this out. All right, so here is the crux of the tool that we're going to be using. It's called the Whole Health Spider Graph. And it was developed many years ago by Larry Broughton, my business partner, my mentor, my great friend. He's like a brother to me. We are, I just love him like crazy. And he's been using it for years. Now, some people, I'm a certified John Maxwell coach, and they use something called the Wheel of Life. But there ends up being a problem with this, where you end up ranking yourself on a scale of like 0 to 10, and then the different areas of your life, how good they are. Because the idea behind this normally has been to have some kind of a balance in your life. Okay, so there's a problem, but we're going to talk about that in a sec. Now, the Whole Health Spider Graph, it will provide these things to you. We'll talk about it more, but it gives you a starting point. It's going to give you a bunch of self-awareness if you take it seriously. It'll give you proper balance. And I have balance in quotes for a particular reason. And it's also going to give you the basis of a plan to get to the ending point that you want to get to. And it will give you some checkpoints along the way. So we're going to see how this works in a couple of minutes. So let's take a quick review. Personal success. It's like a journey, a road trip. We need a vehicle. That vehicle is education, job, career, franchise, for example, investments, if you're a franchisee. It needs fuel. We talked about what that is. Money, information, time, energy, relationships. You need a map. You're going to need a starting point, an ending point. Now, you've probably already got this in your mind, what that ending point will be. And you need some checkpoints. Okay. Now, what is going to be the hardest part of all of this? And it's the starting point. The question is, why? Well, the reason is because we're emotional creatures. We like to think we're logical and that we weigh everything equally, but we don't. From the marketing perspective, people end up buying on emotion and then they justify their decision based on logic. So we make a lot of the times we make our first decision on an emotional basis and we don't think it through. Now, the hard part is ourselves. When it comes to ourselves, we're the hardest person in the world to be honest with. And why is that? Well, Les Brown has a great quote, great personal development person. He says, you can't see the frame when you're in the picture. So the idea is that we cannot see ourselves. The only reason we can, figure out that we're not going to cut ourselves when we shave is we have to look in a mirror in the morning. We need something outside of ourselves to actually get a good idea of what we look like and where we're really at in our lives. So there's a couple of areas that we end up being dishonest with ourselves. We think we're not capable, and we are. I don't know if you've ever heard about the imposter syndrome. That's basically it. And, where we think at any particular point in time, you're doing something and you think, oh my gosh, if they just really knew who I was, they wouldn't like me, or they'd fire me, or they'd, kick me to the curb. So this is what a lot of us suffer from. We think we're not capable, and we really are. But on the other end of the spectrum is we think we're amazing, and we're not. We think that we can do something, and there's just no way. I'm about 5'10". Can I dunk a basketball? Only on a ladder. So there's just a bunch of stuff that I cannot do, and I have to be realistic. This should look familiar to you, American Idol. You got Simon and Paula and Randy. What are they doing here? They are just, they're laughing their tails off right here. Why are they doing that? Well, I didn't want to show the guy that was singing, but he was really, really, really bad. And they're just busting up. There are some people who, especially on American Idol, you'll see that they think they have got the greatest of voice, that they should be a star. It's what they've dreamed of forever. But you know what? It's just not them. So the starting point when we're going on any kind of a road trip or a journey, a real road trip or a personal journey to success, the starting point is critical. It's critical we get the starting point right. Otherwise, our map can be flawed if it's inaccurate. The checkpoints along the way can be wrong. And one of the reasons why that's so important is because as we journey, and this is something to remember, is these checkpoints along the way are going to be our new starting point, and we may be adjusting course. Most likely we will be. So it's imperative that we understand how to get an accurate starting point of where we are. If it's inaccurate, we can run out of fuel. We can be going in the total wrong direction and just exhaust ourselves and do stuff that's just not getting us there. We can also be sacrificing way too much to get there. It's okay to sacrifice for a short period of time, but for a long period of time, that's may not be the right thing to do. So the question is how are we going to establish an accurate starting point? Well, it is with a whole health spider graph, right, where we assess ourselves. And Mike referred to a few of these areas. But Larry and I talk about the different 8 areas that there are that we want to assess ourselves with. The physical, financial, professional, leisure and fun. How much fun are we having in our lives? What's our mental state, our mental emotional state like? Spiritual, and our family, and then, of course, friends. We separate that out. And then, of course, once you end up figuring out where you are on a scale of 0 to 10, then you can chart yourself and get yourself a nice little graph that shows obviously how well you're doing. or how poorly you're doing. Well, Larry and I had been having our mastermind folks. We've run mastermind programs for years, and we've had them do this every time we meet, every few months. One day, something happened that illustrated a really big problem. That problem was somebody rated themselves, if you can see that there, a 1 in every single category. And we were like, no way, dude, there's no way you can do this. That doesn't make any sense. But for him, he rated himself a 1 in every single area, which is almost the lowest on the scale. So we figured out that, we gotta find a way to prevent that. We gotta prevent the eeyore effect. Now, hopefully you guys you're familiar with eeyore from the Winnie the Pooh story in, I think it's A.A. Milne's story that Disney has made so famous. What does Eeyore say? The sky has finally fallen. Always knew it would. So his attitude is almost always negative, right? So this is the Eeyore effect that can really get us because we don't have a good way of sometimes establishing our starting points. Remember, we talked about being an emotional creature. Now, this person's case, it was extreme, of course, but it does illustrate the flaw we discovered in the tool. And that is still likely present in the ones that lots of other people use. Okay, so the flaw is related to our brains. So our brains were built thousands of years ago for a very different purpose than our society today, than what we typically need it for, which is survival. So in so many instances of our lives today, we're not trying to survive. We're not trying to figure out where our next meal is coming from, where we're going to sleep at night, worry about the tigers that are in the jungle that are about ready to eat us. We don't have to worry about that stuff. But our brains still react that way. When we detect anything that may cause us pain or is a threat to our survival, we want to fight or flee. We want to react to it in a way that we shouldn't. For example, this is uncomfortable for me to be doing this. And in all honesty, I was like, Travis, should I be canceling? I don't want to do this. But, I wanted to thrive. And so that's part of our brain's mechanism is that we want to get rid of and not do anything that we feel is going to be painful. Okay. Now, the other thing is our brains have a tendency to have a couple of emphases that I wanted to point out to you. One is any type of event that is recent, you're going to give that more credence to how you feel about yourself than anything that's done in the past. So you're going to rate yourself higher than in the past. For example, if you just came off of the most amazing vacation, the most awesome leave, you're going to give yourself a 10 on that particular leisure scale. Okay. The other thing is if there's something that's really negative in your life, it's going to reflect much higher than something that is positive. For example, Travis, you're a real estate agent. Say you haven't made a sale or listing in the last 6 months. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, professionally, I'm just going to rate myself a 1 on that scale. But you've been doing real estate for years. You're an expert at it. You're one of the best in the business. So that particular negative event really will get you to rate yourself more poor than you should. I know that if you have like 100 positive reviews on a book that you've written on Amazon, but then there's only a couple of negative reviews, you look at those negative reviews and say, oh my gosh, what happened? How can I fix that? Did I really screw up here? What do I change for next time? And we kind of ignore the positive. Okay. So that's something we got to realize that this is how our brain is working. So what's needed here is we need less feelings and more data. Remember, the title of this is establishing personal benchmarks for success. So we need some marks, some data to help us that's a little bit outside of ourselves. So what we did is we updated the spider graph and to a way that we can actually establish some markers. It might be a little bit hard to see here. Hopefully you can see my mouse, but so here is the graph, and you've got multiple time points, and we'll talk about that in a sec, where you track your activities to achieve wholeness and balance in life. So there's directions here. This is what you can actually get when you if you decide to download it, and I'll give you the link to where you can get it from. But you can just follow these directions here. So the idea is you start here. This is an Excel workbook. You have to use Excel. But you start here on this particular tab or sheet, and it gives you the instructions. And then what you do is you go to the next sheet at a particular point in time, and then you rate yourself. And we'll show you how that happens. So you rate yourself at this time, and then the next time that you want to do it, you go to the red one, then the green one for the next one, and then the purple one. The spider graph one, this is the one that gives you a summary of what you've done. All right, so I'm going to show you that in a second. So hang in there with me. It may be a little bit confusing. All right. So here's an example for physical. And I know Mike talked a lot about this because it's so important. So what we've done here is we've created a spot in the upper left-hand corner there where you would fill out the current date. And then for the physical area, the idea is to pick two to four of these, what we call markers or benchmarks, to evaluate yourself on. So in other words, you can actually look and think of how true some of these things are about you, as opposed to saying, oh, I just feel pretty good today. So my physical, I'm going to rate myself physically a 10. Well, take a look at all of these. Pick 2 or 4. So for example, this one here, I'm moving towards or maintaining my ideal weight. Okay. And then I rate myself a 7. Down here is my cholesterols are acceptable. This one is I rate myself a 5. I feel little to no pain when moving. And then this one is my sex drive is healthy and acceptable. That's more of a concern for us old guys, of course. So the idea is that you pick 2 or 4 of these and give yourself a rating on a scale of 1 to 10, and then what you do is you'll see that this will calculate an average result that gets pulled over later, and I'll show you that here in a sec. Okay, so you just fill in the number that you want. Now over here, you can see how it will pull into the last sheet the numbers according to your physical ratings, financial, professional, leisure, fun, etc. Right? So you have a score in all of those areas. So then you'll see something like, hey, there's a 2. Overall, my average is 2 in the professional, and my average in family is 1. So what you might want to do then is create some type of a SMART goal or have some kind of a comment here. So for example, in the professional area, I said, I will take 1 class this fall and achieve a B or better. Okay. So this is a good checkpoint of yourself. Are you on the road to having a great score in your professional life? Now, this is specific, 1 class. I could have made it more specific by saying what subject it'll be, but it's measurable. I'm going to do 1, and I'm going to do 1. A is, some people may say aligned or achievable. It's aligned with my values. It's what I want to accomplish in life. R is realistic. Yeah, I can do 1 class for sure this fall. And T is for, is it time sensitive or time bound? Yes, it's this fall. Okay, so measurable is I'll achieve a B as well. The next one would be in family. You could say I will text my spouse daily for the next month and just set an alarm on my phone and do that. So you can see here, this points out to you in a relatively non-emotional way of where you're at in any particular aspect of your life. Because like we said at the beginning, if you are amazing in the financial, you got a 10 here, but then you've got a 1 in your family, you may be headed for trouble. So you got to start realizing that it's important to have a little bit of self-awareness and some semblance of balance in each of those areas. And then of course, the tool will actually plot it for you so you can see graphically like, hey, I'm pretty good up here, and oh, these 2 are terrible. So I better do something about it. Okay, that's one of the things that I think Mike talked about is being so action oriented. And that's the military folks that I've been around at the different conferences. The people in our masterminds are just so action oriented. They do what they say they're going to do, and it's awesome. So then ultimately what you get here is, and I'll have to push through this pretty quick, but what you get here is an overall graph of how you're progressing over time. So you can see here, this was one particular date, and then a month later, these were my ratings. And a month later, these were my ratings. And then we tell people maybe go a quarter after you've done it for the first 2 or 3 months. So that's a quarter later. So you can kind of see on the graph, if you go from blue, red to green to purple, you've seen that you're making some progress here. You can also see graphically, are you maintaining like you are in the money area? Or if you're maybe in a little bit of danger, you're maybe moving down a little bit, maybe not. But you can really get an idea graphically of where you're at. So what are some of these markers? We talked about some in the physical area. So, but some common ones between all the areas are if you have a mentor for this area. Now, mentors can be people. It could be blogs, books, courses, audios, etc. All of those things you can consider as mentors. Maybe you have a favorite author in a particular area, like from a relationship perspective or family, Henry Cloud and John Townsend, their series of books. And then, of course, another common marker is, do you have an accountability partner? Now, an accountability partner has a few requirements. It's not your buddy. It's not your drinking buddy. It's not your friend. Could be a friend, but it's got to be somebody who's going to speak truth into your life. That truth has got to be both the good and the not so good. He's got to call you out when you're doing poorly, but then lift you up as well to encourage you that you can do better, and then to really help praise you and celebrate with you when you're doing great. Then, of course, in the tool, you can pick your own marker, something that means more to you. So again, I'm showing all of these for completeness here in all the different areas for the presentation that you can look at. So here's all the physical markers, and I just want to remind you, you pick 2 to 4 to evaluate yourself. Now, you could be an overachiever if you want and do all of them, and that's totally up to you. But typically 2 to 4 would be a good approach. And here's the different financial markers. For example, my cash flow is stable or trending in a positive direction. There's one down here that has been instrumental for me. My net worth is tracked regularly and increases yearly. Well, I've been tracking my net worth since 2009, but I've got 10 years of history, and it's been one of the great habits that I've done that's allowed me to make some awesome and amazing decisions to know where I'm going. It's a great checkpoint. Professional markers. And the first one, I'm actively working towards becoming a recognized expert in my field. I think no matter what field we're in, we have to work towards that. Leisure and fun markers. I regularly take time to recharge myself in ways I enjoy. The key thing for that is ways I enjoy. This recharging is about you and doing it the way that you want to recharge. It could be sitting and watching Netflix. It could be going mountain biking. It could be spending time with friends, whatever that would be. Mental markers. I regularly read and or study personal development books. I know Mike talked about that. We asked about their favorite books. I have a big bookshelf right behind me that's got some of my books. Spiritual markers. I attend gatherings associated with my spiritual quest. Family markers, regular date nights. That's an important one. And then friends. So how do we choose those markers? How do we choose? So I want you to consider the following. Consider the vision for your life. The vision is an ending state of your life or a period of time, what you aspire to, right? The end result. For example, a company vision might be, or a nonprofit vision might be, everyone has clean water to drink. That's their ending state. But what I recommend is you take the 8 spider graph areas and create a statement for each one. For example, in mine, in the professional area, I say I'll have great progress in my sales, marketing, and business development skills, as well as staying up to date on website development technically. So that's my vision of what I want to do from a professional perspective. Okay. Now, goals. That's the ending point. Consider your ending point, where you want to go. Consider the key stakeholders in your life, your kids, your spouse, your friends, your mom, your coworkers, or your boss, right? What are the key stakeholders in your life? Think about what you may need to do to serve them. And then, of course, pick those that provide leverage. And I know Mike talked about it, physical exercise. This is an area for me, as well as a morning routine, that helps me emotionally. So part of my morning routine is journaling. So what I do in the morning is typically I'll read my Bible, I journal, I'll read some affirmations, I pray for our neighbors, and then I go exercise. Now, an easy way to journal that I found, and I've done this every day for like, oh gosh, 4 or 5 years since we've had it up. You can go to ugozi.com/daily and opt in to get an email that comes to you every day with a short thought that you can journal on in the areas of personal achievement and success. I recommend you do that. So the question you may have in your mind is balance, but what about balance here? Well, balance is not necessarily the goal. Having great scores in all areas at any particular time is possible, but it's kind of unlikely for most of us. It's really just awareness of where you need to shore yourself up and to not totally sacrifice the other areas long term. Okay. So you may want to just choose one area for emphasis so that you can then decide to decrease something else temporarily. So you can make a concerted push in that area. But beware of what you are sacrificing when you do this. So talk to those stakeholders and get their approval. Here's some final thoughts. Develop habits in all areas. There's a couple of great books. One of my favorite books, Atomic Habits, talks a lot about moving into the subconscious. The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg is awesome as well. Develop habits. You can get more accomplished by doing habits because you don't have to use your decision-making part of your brain. Practice habit stacking. In other words, do 2 things at once. When I go to the gym, when I'm riding the exercise bike, I'll read a book. When I'm doing weights, I'll end up listening to a business podcast. Okay, so those are doing 2 things at once. They're stacking great habits on top of each other and conserving time. Create reserves. I know Mike talked about this. Create reserves in the different areas of your lives, both emotional, mental, and physical. Right now is a time where we need to have some of those reserves, given what's going on. And then understand what fuels you, what gives you energy, what gives you excitement, what gives you happiness and a zest for life. And part of that, establish at least one sanctuary for your life. So I have 3 sanctuaries in my life. One is my church, one is the gym, and one is my home. And right now, with what's going on with COVID-19, church is doing online, but we can't gather there, and I can't go to the gym, but I'm just doing yoga at home. That's okay. But my home is great. And if my home wasn't great, my wife is working from home now. And if our relationship wasn't good, we'd probably be at each other's throats. And then, of course, use community. Part of that community is establishing accountability partners, using coaches, being on programs like this, going into masterminds, and, of course, trusted friends. And then finally, be thankful constantly. Be thankful in everything you're doing. An easy way to do that is just to think about what life was like 150 or 200 years ago compared to what it is now. There's a reason why people didn't smile in photographs and paintings 150, 200 years ago, because they had crappy teeth. So be grateful just for great dental care that we have now. There's tons of things we can be so thankful for. And where to grab it, you can go to ugoziinsider.com/spider. And you can grab the tool. You don't have to even put your email in there. You just download it, and there's a video there that I talk about how to use it. So again, go to ugoziinsider.com/spider, and you can grab it. And that's me, Travis. I am done just in time.
Man, Dave, let me tell you, bud, once again, you never cease to amaze me with your insight. And I just can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day to share this with our audience. I've already gotten a few texts from people, so don't be surprised if people reach out to you because they want to get some take advantage of some of these, because like I said before, you've really been able to kind of dial it in and put a quantifiable measure on a life balance. And that's something that we all struggle with, whether you're in the civilian or military, is
Oh
finding that
yeah.
balance. Because it's
Yeah.
always like whack-a-mole, isn't it? It's like
It is
like
in
you're
a lot
always
of ways.
whack-a-mole on something with your life, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And Larry, it was Larry's tool to start with, and we both worked together to create it as it is now, which I think is really, really good. We've had some great feedback from our mastermind folks on it. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, Dave, I can't thank you enough. I'm bringing in our next panelist as we
All right.
speak. And so for the sake of time and keeping things moving, I'm sure people might have questions. So make sure you check into Facebook. I'll send you some questions if they come through on here. But if you want to answer any questions, or anybody listening, if you have questions for Dave, hit him up on Facebook and put a question in the comments under this broadcast, and he'll go jump in and answer those questions. So, man, any final thoughts?
Thank you. It was an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I just hope it helps some folks, because it really, if you balance it out appropriately, it's like self-awareness. You won't sacrifice one area for the other, and that's just huge, because you can get off the rails really quickly in life.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Well, thanks again
so much.
Thank you for having me on. It's been an honor.
Anytime, my man. Anytime. And keep doing what you're doing. And we'll be in touch soon. Okay.
All right. Thank you, sir. Bye.
All right.